For anybody who has attended in the past, thank you for returning for the Design Dialogues this month. We do have a webinar this month with one guest speaker, and we're going to be going over the strategies for functional outdoor kitchen layouts. So we've seen a lot of different kitchen designs in our time. Russ and I have quite a bit of experience between the both of us. He has maybe a little bit more than me. But basically, we put together a presentation today that kind of goes over some guides, tips, rules of thumb, and things that you can keep in mind as you're starting out in kitchen design to make sure that you're really using every square inch of your space. So I'll introduce myself first. I'm Ashley Smith. I'm the Director of Architect and Designer Partnerships at Pleina Group, which is the banner company over Urban Bonfire in Kalamazoo. I've been doing this for about 9 years, have a background in interior design. And then today I have a great guest speaker who is Russ Faulk. So I'll let him talk a little bit about himself. But like I said, we're in for a treat today. He has so much experience in this, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. So Russ, take it away.
We'll see how much of a treat it is. I get a little pragmatic about usability and layout, but I have been with Kalamazoo Outdoor Gourmet for more than 20 years and part of the Pleina family since we did that a few years ago. My main job, at least what I think of as my main job, is designing Kalamazoo's product, but I also assist with our more challenging kitchen designs and things like that. My background is mostly on the creative side, starting off in graphic design, moving into interface design for both the web and applications before finding myself here. And so I'm pretty passionate about usability.
And for those who know Kalamazoo, Russ is basically responsible for all of your favorite appliances that you have used. So he knows a thing or two about grilling as well, in case you've seen any of his videos. But today we're focusing on design.
Thank you, Ashley. So we're going to cover some of the key strategies for functional outdoor kitchen layouts. They do overlap a lot, as you will see. Talking about designing for usability, talking about how we go about selecting features and making sure we allocate the space for those features. I'm going to touch a little bit today on factoring for safety, which we're going to go a little more in depth in than I think I've ever done before in one of these design sessions. And then we'll close out with creating all the modern comforts we expect in the outdoor kitchen. So kicking it off with designing for usability, there's a pretty broadly accepted definition of usability out there, especially if you take a sort of software or interface perspective. Usability is the ease with which a user can accomplish their goals. And we don't decide what the user's goals are, right? They have their own goals, and we need to make sure that they can easily accomplish them. So when we're applying that to the outdoor kitchen, it breaks down into a few areas. We've got prepping food, including prepping the kitchen and moving into the kitchen. Often the outdoor kitchen isn't stocked all of the time, so we really do move into the kitchen before a cooking occasion. What it's like to cook, both alone and with others. And we're going to talk a little bit about the space needs when you're cooking with other people. Serving, both in the kitchen and in other spaces, adjacent outdoor living spaces. Cleaning, and then moving out of the outdoor kitchen. We'll touch a little bit on entertaining, including all of the non-meal moments that tend to happen in and around an outdoor kitchen. So this example here, we've got some drawings from an actual project that's in the works. I think they're going to be breaking ground soon. So this is the real case of a very recent project that was top of mind. And we're talking about prepping and moving into the outdoor kitchen. This outdoor kitchen doesn't have a lot of refrigeration, doesn't really have a ton of storage. So there is some move-in involved, and moving in happens from the indoor kitchen, which is right on the other side of those big lanai doors there. As we're moving in, it's important to make sure we have food safe cold storage, especially if we're going to keep any proteins or produce or dairy out in the kitchen for any length of time. And not all outdoor refrigeration is actually food safe. There's a lot of outdoor refrigeration that's really just more of a beverage center kind of situation. And it's very important we keep those proteins, produce, dairy products below the temperature where bacteria can develop, which is 40 degrees. You want an outdoor refrigerator that's got the horsepower and the insulation to hold 34 degrees or its set temperature below 40 degrees. So it's a very important consideration when we're talking about moving into the kitchen.
I have a question for you, Russ.
Yeah.
As a rule of thumb, for beverage centers versus food safe refrigerators, are beverage centers typically the ones that have a glass door? Like, is there a visual way that you can kind of see this, or you really have to look into the specs?
So if we're talking about a line of refrigeration that has food safe refrigeration as part of it, the beverage centers, yes, are often identified with a glass door. They'll often have a couple wine shelves in there, but a lot of it is also just based on the temperature range as opposed to the door style that gets put on. If we're doing a panel ready door or something like that, it's going to look from the outside like anything else. But for broader ranges like Kalamazoo's range of refrigeration, if you just look at the owner's manuals for it, you'll see the temperature ranges for the different pieces of equipment. And that'll also give you a good sense of whether or not it's food safe storage. But admittedly, sometimes when I throw out the term beverage center, it's a judgment on something that's supposed to be a refrigerator that actually doesn't hold the right temperature. So
Gotcha.
yeah, there's a broad array of things out there.
Okay.
When it comes to cooking, you're going to be cooking alone or with others. As I mentioned, here in this kitchen, we have 3 separate cooking stations. We're trying to allocate space for each one, although admittedly, I would love to see more countertop to the left of the pizza oven and to the right of the smoker to make sure you've got enough room to land food when it comes off of the grill or out of the pizza oven, enough room to prep the pizza before it goes in the oven. We're having to rely on the sink side of the kitchen a little bit for counter space. But we also have done everything we can not to cram these together. There's 2 feet, really almost more like 36 inches between the grill and the smoker. And then there's another 36 inches between the grill and the pizza oven. So we have some room to work. And then between the 2 sides of the galley, if we're anticipating more than 1 cook, I like to see at least 5 feet of space so that when you're opening a 24-inch door, you've still got 3 feet left so you can pass by and people aren't running into each other. So we've talked about the landing areas there. Landing areas are just a critical aspect of kitchen usability, both indoors and out. And then we have a little bit of tool storage. So the 12-inch wide pullout to the left is a cabinet that we leverage pretty often across lines to store long, thin tools like your grill brushes, your tongs, things like that, things you want to keep in the kitchen all the time. And then we have a little bit more space to the right. We've got plenty of space to move. I also do prefer, whenever possible, to do more of a galley style as opposed to a U-shaped kitchen where we're creating a dead end and there's only one way in or out. And then when it's time to serve, one of the things that can be great to have is warm food storage. And this, again, is labeled food safe warm storage. We want to stay above 140 degrees Fahrenheit for food safe warm storage. The danger zone for bacteria is between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So we want our cold storage below that, and we want our warm storage above that. We also have a handy place for serving boards and platters that you can grab quickly. It's part of our move into the kitchen, is getting all those things there that maybe don't live there the whole time. And then we leverage the island and the bar as our serving surfaces. So this is where people can be grabbing their own food. It's where the warm food is plated and ready to go, all of our platters and such. As we go to the adjacent spaces, the dining area, the bar top area, as well as the lounge area off to the right. When comes time to clean up, we frequently will see dishwashers in outdoor kitchens. In this case, we don't have one, so we're relying on the indoor kitchen for that, but we do need our sink. We do need our cleaning supplies underneath the sink, and we do definitely want to make sure we include a waste and recycling space in the kitchen so we're not dragging the 32-gallon can from the garage.
You wouldn't design an indoor kitchen without a waste and recycling. So keep that in mind when you're designing outdoor kitchens as well.
Very true. Very true. And then, of course, we move back into the indoor kitchen to clear everything up. When it comes to entertaining, that's typically a little less of what I'm involved in. But in this case, we have fire feature, we have lounge seating, we have the dining space. And then, of course, I anticipate a lot of entertaining is going to actually happen at the raised bar in the kitchen, whether or not cooking is going on.
I have to interject here as well. One thing that you taught me, Russ, that I tried to remind people of when I'm doing any webinars or design is that you always want to include the cook in the party, or when they are cooking, you don't want them to have their back to everybody. You want to make sure that they can engage with their guests. And so that's, I think, where this entertainment part comes in pretty importantly as well, is you don't want the cook just off in a corner somewhere. You want them to be able to interact with everybody. So accounting for the seating around.
Yeah, it is a challenge, especially when it comes to like not having your back to people. We have our culinary center in Chicago is actually set up similar to this. And even though if I'm at the grill, my back is to people, I can easily just turn 90 degrees. But I end up spending a lot of my time, the actual discussion and all of that, standing in front of the sink and addressing the people who are at the raised bar area. But definitely not hidden off in a corner.
At the minimum.
At the minimum. Now, we do actually create kitchens where it's staff that's cooking, and we're specifically trying to hide the cook, but that is a rare occurrence. Most of the time, it's the homeowner doing the cooking. So I don't know how many people we have on this webinar that are experienced with indoor kitchens, but one of the things we like to emphasize is that all of the best usability principles from indoor kitchen design do apply outdoors. We are, however, working with some extra challenges and in a lot of cases, extra constraints. From a challenges standpoint, we're dealing with the elements. We have to deal with the rain. We have to deal with wind. We have to deal with a corrosive environment if we're on the coast or if there's a saltwater pool. There's a detail that sometimes people get tripped up on, and that's countertop depth. Because we're used to 24 to 25 inch deep counters in the indoor kitchen. They're closer to 30 outdoors, and that's kind of evolved so that we can work around the installation of a grill and the fact that we're often putting those grills in an island in a way that a range frequently is not. So the counters are a little deeper. But on a related note, we're also dealing with space constraints. The outdoor kitchen is almost always smaller than its indoor kitchen counterpart. There's plenty of outdoor kitchens we've been involved with that are bigger than my indoor kitchen, but they're not bigger than the indoor kitchen in that home. So we're typically working with less space while still trying to achieve the same goals. We have to deal with temperature extremes. We have to deal with freeze thaw. Sun and UV exposure really impacts the materials we choose. And then, of course, darkness. Darkness applies indoors as well, but it's a lot more of a challenge to do task lighting outdoors, especially since we don't often have a ceiling or pendant lights hanging down. So some of the best practices for sound usability that we like to emphasize, and maybe if you watch this recording later, you can create a drinking game over how many times I talk about counter space, but we want to plan ample counter space, and we want to make sure that we're planning that ample counter space around each functional zone of the kitchen. Every activity area, everything you want to do, we need to make sure there's countertop space to support it. That comes down to the detail of preserving landing zones on both sides of each station, including the sink. We break our own rules a lot of times. You'll see a sink at the end because we find it more end of a countertop run, because we find it more important to squeeze that sink in than necessarily to preserve landing area on both sides, but we really want to see it on both sides. We want to include a sink and faucet for hand washing. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do most of my prep indoors, so let's not go through the hassle of the sink. But if you've just handled that raw chicken or raw fish, you really want to be able to wash your hands outside and not have to go put your dirty hands on that screen door to get inside and wash your hands. It's important to plan for effective task lighting so you can work after dark. And we really want to focus on specifying durable materials. We want the kitchen to be easy to live with. So when we're talking about that, we want it to be suitable materials for all of the different seasons, all of the different weather it's exposed to, but we also want it to be easy to clean and live with. If it feels for the homeowner like they have to spend 3 hours getting the outdoor kitchen ready to use because it's a pain to keep clean, then they're not going to use it as much. And I like to see the outdoor kitchen be an everyday kitchen for the home. So being thoughtful about the materials we choose can make a huge difference. Lastly, we want to provide shelter, heating, and cooling to extend the season to maximize the homeowner's investment in the space so they can use it as often as they want through as much of the year as they want to.
To add on to something that you mentioned at the beginning of that, Russ, I think it's really, you said counter space is the most important, and I 100% agree. There's the advantage of having an outdoor kitchen is to have preparation and storage space. And then when you don't include any of that preparation or storage space, you basically just have a grill at the end of the day. So you do want to plan for that. But we understand also that not every kitchen can have every single landing zone that we recommend. There are space constraints in the outdoors as well as the indoors. And so prioritizing kind of what's most important, I think will come in a lot during this presentation as well. And a sink is certainly one of those things that we say absolutely include if and when you can. And if that's at the detriment of a landing area, then go ahead and do that, because it really does make a big difference to the enjoyability and the usability of the kitchen.
And one of the things we don't talk about a lot, but is certainly a practical solution to including a sink when we really maybe don't have the space, is to have a cover, a usable cover on that sink. Let's say it's a butcher block top that goes over the sink, so that the sink can be countertop space when you need it, and it can be still a sink when you don't need the countertop space. So the most common usability issues really are kind of the opposite of many of the most important usability factors. One, the kitchen is just too small for the job. We're asking the kitchen to do too much. Overcrowding the kitchen with too many appliances and features for its size. I'm going to show you an example of that. Not having enough task lighting to cook after dark. The lack of a sink so you can't wash your hands, or if we put in a sink, let's also make sure we put a waste disposal in the sink so it can be truly fully used like a kitchen sink. Lack of waste cans. As Ashley pointed out, you'd never do an indoor kitchen without a waste cabinet. Let's not do it outdoors either. Materials that prioritize style over function. The most common example of that I see is particularly in the northeastern United States is bluestone. Using bluestone for countertops is just a nightmare for the homeowner, but it's local material. It's popular from an aesthetic standpoint. It's used in other outdoor living spaces, but I'd love to keep it off the countertop because it stains too easily. It's impossible to clean. I was at one client's home, and they lay out big black trash bags on their countertop before they cook, which is really not what we want to see somebody having to do. Another, the last one really isn't the opposite of anything on the other page, and that's oversights requiring utility connections. We want to make sure we plan all of those things as early in the process as possible, so that we can effectively have all the utility connections we need, the right amount of gas, the right style of connection for any of the cooking products, water supply and wastewater, and of course, electricity.
I did have a question that came in, Russ, if you want to take a pause for a moment. When a 30-inch countertop next to a bar countertop, what's the preferred bar countertop depth?
That is a great question. It can get too long. So at my height, I typically can deal with a 30-inch countertop plus an 18-inch bar and still reach it. But Stephanie, our culinary experience manager, she's going to run out of room at about 14 inches of countertop. So it depends on how much you need to reach across and do. We do, of course, need in the neighborhood of 14 inches of knee space under that bar. So that it is certainly a factor. I do like, when doing countertop seating, to raise that countertop seating, especially in a layout like the one where we were going through all the different principles of usability, where the sink is where people are sitting, and I prefer that over seating people behind a hot grill. So in those situations with the sink, I like to raise their seating so that as a cook, I'm not having to worry as much about splashing them, and they're not also looking at everything I'm cleaning up in the sink. So it just creates this little splash barrier that I do find to be helpful. It's also a lot easier to find outdoor bar height counter stools than it is 36-inch seating kitchen counter type stools. Hopefully that came through clearly. Bar height seating is a lot easier to find than counter height seating, so that helps as well.
Perfect.
So when it comes to features, we're really trying to figure out what the client needs, what the client wants. How do they cook today? How do they entertain today? How do they aspire to cook in their new outdoor kitchen? This might be their first outdoor kitchen. So what are they hoping to do? When it's cooking, we've got everything from basic grilling, whether you think of that as hamburgers or salmon fillets, to specialty interests, which for a lot of people is pizza making, but it could be any number of things. Paella, we'll have to have a big surface for a big pan, things like that. Beverage service, whether it's juice boxes for the kids and popsicles to somebody who loves making craft cocktails, they want to take that fun outdoors. There's a whole range in all of these. Scope of the kitchen, from a simple grill island to a fully stocked, fully capable kitchen, or anything in between. How much seating are we trying to work with? Is it just very minimal seating, or are there full dining and lounge areas? And entertainment outdoors, there's nothing you can't do. I was looking at this big fold-out screen, almost put it in the presentation, but 240-inch video screens that come up out of the ground and then fan out and articulate, so you can have home outdoor theater. There's so much you can do. And then, of course, you can just bring out your little Bluetooth speaker and enjoy some music while you cook. But whatever features we select, we need to allocate enough space for each activity. Like I said, these concepts overlap a lot. This is an example of a kitchen where there is too much crammed in. And we deal with this all the time. The homeowner is just requesting so much stuff. Even in this simple example, if that tap tower wasn't there and it was just a refrigerator, this kitchen would be a lot more usable. But I would love to see it open up even more. 15 feet isn't a small outdoor kitchen run, but it is too small for this many appliances that interrupt the countertop. So depending on how much space we have, we can figure out some of the priorities, or we need to figure out the priorities and then allocate more space potentially. But from a cooking standpoint, the range of grills available today is broader than it ever was before. Whether it's gas grills, charcoal grills, wood grills, hybrid grills, which I have a passion for, electric grills, and then what form and style of cooking are they for? Whether it's a Kamado style cooker, Argentinian style wood-fired grills are becoming much more readily attainable than they ever were before. How important is rotisserie? All of these things are conversations we need to have with clients and understand. If they're into barbecue, they may want to have a dedicated smoker. Some grills can smoke, some pellet grills are smokers, but anytime you're combining them, you're making compromises. So if you have somebody really passionate about smoking, we want to think about getting a dedicated piece of equipment for that so they can do the competition grade barbecue they aspire to do. Those could be offset smokers that people in the industry would call a stick burner, pellet smokers, which are incredibly popular, gravity smokers, which I love, and electric smokers. The whole range is available. And then, of course, ovens. Most common kind of oven to see in the outdoor kitchen is going to be a pizza oven, but don't underestimate how well a Kamado style cooker, a good Kamado, can be used as an oven. But there are wood-fired ovens, there's electric ovens, there's old world charcoal ovens that are becoming popular right now that I find very intriguing. And then tandoors, we'll show you an example of that on the next slide. And cooktops, induction cooktops in particular. There's a lot of them that are perfectly suitable for outdoors. So this is a growing option. But when we're talking about really tailoring the outdoor kitchen to the individual client's needs and taste, that is where we find sometimes we need to figure out a traditional clay tandoor for doing chicken tikka or naan, things like that. It really runs the gamut. As we're dealing with these cooking features, we need to make sure we support those cooking features with landing areas, with tool storage, sometimes with fuel storage, whether that's a propane cylinder or it's split wood or it's 30 pounds of charcoal. We want to keep those things in the kitchen and not have to run to the garage to get them and then figure out where to put them. Food safe refrigeration, I've already harped on. And of course, hand washing, I've also talked about. Beverage centers or beverage service can get pretty big, right? You've got ice machines. We can do cube ice, traditional clear ice cubes. We can do chewable ice or crushable ice, or what some people call cubelets, craft ice, big spheres, things like that for craft cocktails, refrigerators and freezers, wine preserves, including dual zone. That picture that you see there is a dual zone wine preserve. So we can set the bottom portion of it for the temperature for storing whites and the top portion for storing reds, or we can do the bottom portion for whites and the top portion for sparkling. So it's kind of the ultimate luxury, although my passion would be more on the next one, which would be a beer tap. Having draft beer in the outdoor kitchen is certainly fun, but you can also do a wine tap. You can do nitro coffee taps. You can do soda taps. They require slightly different equipment, but these are things we can do in the outdoor kitchen. On-demand hot water, filtered water to the outdoor kitchen can be important, depending on your local water quality. And then ice wells. A lot of times it's just great to have the potential for two sinks, one of which is used primarily as an ice well, but has the drain built in and everything else. And those are great for entertaining. You can stage a bunch of cold beverages. Support for beverage service. We need to store our glasses and our tools, things like cocktail mixing glasses, measure jiggers, things like that. Glass rinsers, love to see a glass rinser in the home kitchen. It's a picture of one on the right there. We need space for serving and mixing. A lot of people like to have a bar rail, not something I'm partial to doing. I'll just bring the bottles out, but a bar rail is popular. Sometimes garnish trays, and of course, bar seating is also part of supporting beverage service. And the thing that comes to figuring out features and space allocation is really the scope of the kitchen. And if you've heard me talk before, or some of my coworkers talk before, we'll talk about satellite kitchens versus fully independent kitchens. Same concept we're talking about here. If we have very limited space, the kitchen is obviously going to be relatively small, but it's going to limit its capabilities. It's going to be dependent upon the indoor kitchen for the cold food storage, for some of the prep and cleanup. We might do all of the prep inside and then bring it outside because we don't have the space to do it outside. We don't have the tools. We don't have whatever we need. Those smaller kitchens, I'm still looking for at least 4 feet of countertop, just so that you're not running out of space to set things down. You're not juggling cutting boards and platters. You're not dropping the beautifully grilled sea bass on the ground because you tried to balance it somewhere. Fully capable outdoor kitchen can cut the ties to the indoor kitchen, right? You can have it stocked with all the tools and serving pieces, cutting boards, things like that year round. And it's really just about when you come home with the groceries, or you go into the outdoor kitchen or indoor kitchen. Those are kind of the two extremes, but we really live in between most of the time, where we really are relying on the indoor kitchen refrigeration. We're probably relying on the indoor kitchen's dishwasher, but we can still do more outside without running back and forth.
I think that's an important piece to kind of focus on for a second. Is, before we said you might not have enough space to do everything. That doesn't mean that it can't be done in an adjoining space. If it's right next to the indoor kitchen, you're not losing any of that enjoyability or the usability of the outdoor space, because you're able to do some of those tasks elsewhere that is still really close by. So just because you can't have all of the landing zones or all of the sinks or all of the equipment that you possibly want, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be the best version of the kitchen for your client.
Sure. It's all about setting the right priorities and making the right compromises, but the possibilities of success can certainly factor in how close the indoor kitchen is, how easy we can make it to run between the two, and not design any barriers in between them if we don't need to. So when it comes to seating as a feature, we've got in the kitchen, we've got dining, and we've got lounge. In the kitchen, I've already touched on why I like bar height seating with a protective backsplash. We do want to try and orient it to include the cook in the conversation, or the host. And we do need to make sure that we're not trying to cram 10 people's bar stools into 6 feet of space. The absolute minimum, I think, is 24 inches for each seat. Dining, the thing that we want to factor in is like, how much permanent seating do we need? How big of a dining table? How many chairs do we need for the full-time solution, versus what can we do for temporary expansion, stacking chairs, folding chairs, rolling up another table, bringing a table from outdoors? Where are we going to store these things, and how are we going to allocate space for them if this is an important part of our entertaining plans? And then lounge areas, we'd like to see those near the outdoor kitchen so that the party doesn't end when the cooking's done and everybody disappears. We can stay cohesive. And all 3 of these images are actually from the same project. So this is one of several relaxation areas with a fire pit. This is the dining, and then kind of off the image to the left is where that in-kitchen seating was. When it comes to entertainment, we see more and more televisions outside. It's great fun. They're really, the quality of outdoor televisions has gotten much better. We're starting to see them as more of a prominent feature, like this example you see where it's above the fireplace, like you do in the family room indoors. But they are often still hidden behind cabinet doors, motorized coming up out of the countertop, or the crazy 240-inch one that I talked about that comes up out of the ground. Planning for high quality audio, I think, is great as opposed to just Bluetooth speakers. And one thing that I like to recommend is if you can plan for it, doing more speakers. If we have 4 speakers or 6 speakers thoughtfully spaced in the outdoor living area, we don't have to have the volume as loud for everybody to enjoy the music, because everybody's always closer to a speaker, and that way we don't disturb the neighbors as much and we feel more like we can enjoy our entertainment. So just a little tip there. Factoring for safety. Our priorities around safety are going to be making sure we have a non-combustible construction, assuming that there's grill and fire and cooking involved. Becomes a little less critical if we're talking about electric appliances. Slip resistance. I think slip resistance is as important in the outdoor kitchen as it is around a pool. They get wet. We've got olive oil on the floor. Maybe it rains. You don't want somebody slipping and hitting their head on the hard marble countertop. So slip resistance is very important. We want to avoid people burning themselves. We need to plan for safety shutoffs for all of our gas and our electricity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the real definition of outdoor spaces. But most importantly, above all else, follow the manufacturer's recommendations and make sure you familiarize yourselves with them at the beginning of a project. And some of the things that I'm going to talk about here in terms of requirements are actually sort of universal across all grill manufacturers, because we're following the same certification standards, and we don't have leeway to fudge the rules of certification or safety. It's kind of blanket statement across everything. So non-combustible construction, we want to make sure that we observe the clearance requirements between any outdoor cooking appliance and any combustible walls or enclosures. That distance is determined by the manufacturer. It has to pass tests in terms of how much we'll say back wall, for an example, because that's easy to picture. There's a back wall behind the grill there. In that case, it's non-combustible. But the tests are measuring how much that wall increases in temperature, and it's tested at different distances. The manufacturer chooses the distance, but it has to pass the test. So observe the clearance requirements. If we say that it has to be 9 inches between the sides and back of a grill and any combustible structure, don't try and find workarounds. Stay 9 inches away. The one thing that's absolute is no overhead combustible surfaces. That is one of the boilerplate things that all manufacturers have to print in their manuals and on their serial tags. And it's not a very practical or what am I trying to say? It's absolute to the point where it's laughable. You cannot have an overhead combustible surface 300 feet above the grill. The column goes up for infinity. That's just the way the standards are written. That's what the builder inspector might be looking for. So let's not have a problem. Now, no overhead combustible surfaces literally means the area above the grill cannot be combustible. And that's why we use vent hoods to mitigate it. There are all kinds of ways where, in this picture here, I love this kitchen because it is non-combustible. The Core 10 structure above is not combustible, but they also have a vent hood. So all kinds of ways we can work to make the area above the grill non-combustible, even if you have some combustible shelter going on. So again, work with your manufacturer. I'm harping on that a little bit much. Slip resistance. We want to look at tiles or pavers that are rated for commercial use outdoors or rated for pool decks. Especially within the tile and paver world, those are going to be standard labels that you can find, and we don't want anything that's going to be slippery.
We'll just add to that too. Sorry, Russ, before you go on. I think what some people not forget, but maybe don't realize is that I mean, for me, especially outdoor cooking is so much messier than indoor cooking. You have so many more sauces and oils, and it's just, I don't know, when you're outdoors, I think you don't pay as much attention to being tidy, or maybe that's just me. But I think that's a big
I was going to say, you
consideration
haven't
when
seen
you're
me cook
choosing.
indoors, apparently.
Okay, maybe both, but I find with outdoors, you're just so much more likely to spill things, or it doesn't, you don't care as much if you're spilling it on the ground. And so I think that's why this plays in even more so. And that's why it's so important to consider it ahead of time so that you're not changing out the tiles after a year of use of the kitchen because they're all stained or they're slippery or full of oil. So.
Indeed. So avoiding burns, this isn't about the combustibility clearances, things like that. It's really about how do we protect people from bumping into a hot grill or a hot pizza oven. One key way is not having a grill at the end of a kitchen run or a countertop area. We want to actually use the countertops themselves and cabinet below it or overhangs to create a barrier so people aren't bumping into them. We want to have that buffer zone. We also want to think about arranging a kitchen. Let's imagine that galley style kitchen we were looking at earlier, and it's a pool off to the west side of the kitchen. We're going to want to be thoughtful and arrange our beverage centers or refrigeration, things like that, to that same side of the kitchen, and have the grill and pizza oven, anything that's making fire or getting hot, to the opposite side of the kitchen. So people coming from the pool don't have to bump into a cook and make them bump into the grill, or even just pass by the grill to get a beverage. So how we arrange the kitchen, we want to do that relative to other outdoor living areas in anticipation of children, traffic, things like that. And then safety shutoffs. Everybody knows we have to use ground fault circuit interrupt breakers outdoors. The real tip here is do not put it on the little outlet. And we've all seen the outlets with the reset switches on them like this, but with an outlet top and bottom. You don't want to plug your refrigerator into one of those down in the hole underneath the countertop between two cabinets or surrounded by stone, because to reset it, you have to drag the refrigerator out. Most outdoor kitchens don't need a whole lot of circuits. A typical Kalamazoo kitchen might only draw 6 amps, 7 amps. So we can do that on one circuit, and we can have a master GFI switch for that. But even if you need many circuits, just put in the master switches or slave everything off of the above counter outlet so that you can get at your reset. You can also put that reset in the home's electrical panel, but that's a little more hassle for the homeowner. If you're in a modern home, you might see one of these panels without an outlet in your bathroom running the entire circuit for your bathroom. It's a great way to go for the outdoor kitchen. For gas shutoffs, I like to see gas supply shutoffs for each appliance so that if you need to service that one appliance, you don't have to shut down the entire kitchen. But I also like to see a master shutoff on the main pipe that's easily accessible in an emergency situation. That means your homeowner needs to know where it is. It needs to be at least a few feet from any appliance in case we have a disastrous situation. For example, ground squirrels or chipmunks have been known to chew through the gas hose. And if somehow that were to ignite, you've got a very dangerous situation. Obviously, you can't get at the shutoff if it's underneath the grill where that problem is. So we want it a few feet away and easily accessible. And then the more convoluted one, keeping the outdoors outside. North American standards for outdoor gas appliances have a strict definition for outdoor use. So you'll see it says for outdoor use only. Very simple. They used to also say just do not use in a breezeway or other things, but where there are very definitive guidelines now that I believe were adopted from Australia in terms of what defines outdoors. So you see a little pictogram at the right there, but you'll also find that information in a Kalamazoo owner's manual, and it should be in any other certified gas grill owner's manual. But there are rules around the openness of a structure. And if we are breaking those rules, we're no longer outside. And that can be an issue when the building inspector comes to approve your finished project. So let the manufacturer help you is the short version there.
Who would have thought that you would have to define what outdoors is?
Well, I mean,
So straightforward.
personally, I find these new guidelines a lot preferable to don't use in a breezeway, don't do all these other things because they were so subjective. And it was really hard for me to help ensure that the architect, landscape architect, whoever was on point for the project was going to successfully pass the building inspection when the rule came. Because when it's subjective, then I'm trying to convince them it's not a breezeway. They're saying it is a breezeway. This is a lot more black and white, but it's maybe a little harder to wrap your head around at first. The other thing is, honestly, most people don't like it. It's bad news, right? You look at it as like, but I want to have retracting screens. So it's, well, you can't have retracting screens unless these other things are true. So speaking of retracting screens, we'll transition into creating comfort. There is a lot we can do in the outdoor kitchen to make sure that it is a comfortable place throughout the seasons. Here we've got a good example of shelter. Should it rain, you don't have to be interrupted in using outdoor kitchen. By having that shelter, we have a very easy place to put our lighting because it really becomes the same as the indoor kitchen. We've got can lights, we've got lights in the vent hood, we've got the television for our enjoyment there. We've got another television flanking the grill, smaller. We can do wireless charging inside the countertop. We can use an outdoor rated dishwasher. We want to make sure that we have plenty of outlets. We want to think about heating and cooling. In this case, we don't have infrared heating, but there are plenty of options for electric infrared heating that could go into that ceiling area quite nicely. And heating in an outdoor space really works well when you have an overhead structure that's helping hold that heat in. We also see radiant heat underneath the patio, radiant heat in the countertops, so you can melt the snow and keep the kitchen usable. All kinds of amazing things. We have some lounge seating. Again, that's over next to the bigger TV. So we really can have all the comforts of the modern home. So to wrap up, successful outdoor kitchen design is going to create a space that delivers against the client goals for the full range of outdoor cooking and entertaining occasions that they want to pursue. It's going to include all the desired features while maintaining functional space allocation. And I think it is better to use less features than it is to overcrowd. I think that is going to pay dividends in terms of long-term satisfaction with the kitchen in a better way. We need to make sure we comply with safety guidelines, including all of the manufacturer's instructions. And we're going to offer comfort, relaxing space that somebody really wants to use.
Thank you so much, Russ. I don't have any questions that have come in just yet, but please, everybody, if you didn't hear me at the beginning, there is a Q&A function on here. So feel free to select that at the bottom of your screen and type in your questions there. I do just want to add to, if you've attended any of my other webinars, then you have heard me say this before, but I really think it's the most important aspect of design is that if you're not designing for your client, then it's not going to work for your client. So obviously everything that we have said is a guideline. It's a rule of thumb. It is the best practice, but really the most important thing is to ask your client what the priorities are for them. And like Russ said, to make sure that you are prioritizing those within the space and the confine restrictions that they have. This is why they hire designers. It's otherwise they could make these decisions themselves, but it's part of the job and it's part of making it functional and intentional. This is not in print form anywhere, but this recording will be available probably in about a week. So I can follow up with everybody once it's available. It lives on the website, so you can always go back and listen to it again and again. We do have some guidelines and things that I can send out after this as well. So I'll make sure to follow up with you, Jeanette. So again, for the copy of the presentation, you won't get a copy of this particular presentation, but you will have the recording. And we do have some complimentary guidelines and tips and things like that we can send out once I follow up with everyone.
Great. Yeah, we have outdoor kitchen design guidelines. We have project checklists. What else do we have? We have those two.
Entertainers guides to kitchens, depending on what your client is looking for. We have quite a few different resources that we can certainly send out, and I'll send a link so that you can access all of those.
One of the other things we can touch on that's a little bit of the nitty gritty details, but while we've got a little time and no questions, when we're talking about utilities and making sure we plan for them appropriately, there's all kinds of regulations around what you do with wastewater and exposed sinks, things like that. For large areas of California, you need to tie the wastewater from a sink into the home's wastewater lines. It can't mix into.
I think he just froze for a second. I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody.
We want to make sure that we have a large enough pipe, enough gas supply to deliver the BTUs required for the kitchen. So it's another thing to work with your pipe fitter on. So the question that came through, hopefully everybody can hear me, is are there issues with a louvered bay of a metal pergola that sits at 10 foot high above the grill? Generally, I would say no. It's going to on the finish that's on the pergola, but the metal itself is going to be fine. Something like a Kalamazoo Gaucho grill where we can have a big open fire, we'd want to make sure that the paint on that pergola, whatever finish is on that pergola, if it's not raw steel or Corten, is going to be able to handle the temperatures that it'd be experiencing. But 10 feet is pretty high, and generally I would not anticipate issues with a metal pergola, louvered or otherwise, above the grill that far.
We do have some more time, so we can stay on for a little bit. Feel free to put in any additional questions. If anybody does need to hop off, feel free to do that as well, but we'll be here for a little bit longer, just in case.
A little more on ensuring you have the proper amount of gas. Gas pressure drops off over the length of a pipe. So a longer pipe, we have to compensate for that pressure loss by a bigger diameter. So you'll see on most spec sheets for gas appliances how many BTUs it needs. We need to add up everything with BTU demand together. It's not uncommon for an outdoor kitchen to need to deal with 120,000 BTUs. If we have a gas pipe going to the kitchen that's only 5 feet long, that's going to be super easy. But if it gets to be 20 feet long, 30 feet long, we have to start upsizing that pipe. So that is the detail you want to make sure you talk to your pipe fitter or plumber with about, because if we starve the appliances for gas, they're not going to operate correctly. We also need to factor in the pool heater or gas fireplace, things like that. It's not uncommon for a Kalamazoo kitchen to be on an inch pipe or greater. What were you about to say, Ashley?
I was just going to say, this is exactly why I invited you to be my guest today, because you have all of these little tidbits of knowledge that just come out if you have the opportunity.
I can bore people for an hour. It's no problem.
Absolutely not. This was great. I mean, I think I learned some things today, and I really think that I mentioned this to you before the presentation, but that section about safety, I think it's just something that's not really talked about all that much in design, because it's not the exciting part of design, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered. And the earlier that we do consider that, then the better it's integrated into it. Sure, we did get a thank you, the informative presentation. It's our pleasure. I will take a moment to just tell you about next month as well. Obviously, Design Dialogues is something that we do monthly. We have a few different formats. So we have webinars like this one, but we also have panel formats, and I tend to switch between the two from one month to the next. And so our next one is actually going to be what I'm calling Skyline Design. So it's a focus on rooftop design. So obviously we'll be talking about outdoor kitchens within that, but we do have a couple of experts who will talk about just the different constraints and restrictions and opportunities. I always say, I don't like to say challenges, I like to say opportunities when you're dealing with a smaller kind of urban space. So I'll follow up after this with registration for next month. I'll make sure to tell you when the recording is available, and we'll share some of those resources with you as well. So hopefully I will see you again. With that, I think we'll just let everybody go 9 minutes early, unless, Russ, do you have any last comments that you would like to add?
No, I don't.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Russ. And thank you everybody for joining, and we'll be in touch soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, everyone.